BT14 Blast Ace is going to introduce a lot of new cards to Western audiences. While yes, we are getting Ace Digimon and the powerful training option cards, one thing that is very different is the fact that we have a brand new restriction list to play to. And of course, the release of cards at different times to our Japanese counterpart. Remember Resurgence Booster? This set was supposed to be before BT13, but we got it after. Security Digimon was also something that we were supposed to get earlier, but we got them much later. But most of all, the restriction list will pave way to a much different format. And because of that, I want to look at a few cards that will be a must in some decks if you're not going a tribal or archetypal route. So for players who are playing Justmon, War Greymon, Shine Greymon, and more, you're more than likely going to exclude all of the Digimon I talk about. But for options, you might consider them. First up on my list is going to be the Floodgates for the format. I know, I may sound like a broken record, but there are just so many decks out there that are going to be utilizing the new training option cards, that you'll definitely want to run these 3 cards from BT5 if you have a chance to. While Gaussmon and Cutemon are less likely to be run, for the fact that they don't fit with the tribal theme, Cutemon is a yellow vaccine Digimon. Only problem is it's a level 3, so you can't utilize it with effects like Messenger of Hope. Arguably, Blue Hybrid, Mirage Gaugamon, Ulforce, and Blue Flare will be utilizing 3 to 4 Sayakomons for their effectiveness against everything else. Digizorption from Bloom Lordmon decks? No. Training option cards? Also no. Greymon X? Ha! You wish. Number 2 on my list is still Floodgates. Blue arguably has the best advantage for the next format, for the fact that it not only has Sayakomon, but Madoki Betamon as well. Memory gain effects from Lugomon decks won't work if they can't remove these Floodgates. If you happen to have both, they can realistically only choose one to delete. Other contenders for memory gain would be cards like Quartzmon. Sure, you might suspend the whole board, but you might be giving it a crap ton of memory. The number 3 on the Floodgates is of course, Pomumon, Pillowmon, and the newest member to this group of cards, Gatsumon. While true, none of these cards fit into an archetypal theme, except Pomumon, Gatsumon adds a little bit more support to existing red decks if you're going the Floodgate rookie route. As I mentioned before, tribal decks might not really be looking at Floodgates because they'll want consistency more so than text that might slow their opponents down. Instead, they'll likely be the aggressor to remove their opponent's security as quickly as possible. So instead of messing with their Digimon base, Tamers and option cards are another avenue to go. While there are so many Tamers with stellar effects, this segment of the video will focus on reactive Tamers that can be huge hits if checked in security. The first being Tommy Himi. While true, this Tamer is best utilized in a blue hybrid deck, I'm currently cooking with this Tamer in several different blue builds. This Tamer can strip the bottom 3 sources, and while yes there are other blue cards that can hit sources, because this Tamer can be digivolved into, a stun can also be just as good. Blue hybrid cards like Lanamon could even tuck a blue level 3 under to give it jamming. And to make things worse, if you wanted to attack over Lanamon, it's a trap. Zudomon Ace is just waiting in the wings. Joe Keto from BT14, while not as strong as Tommy, is still a great option to target specialized Digivolution sources. More so, it's just dependent on whether you have other cards to help you out, which I'll cover in the option cards. And lastly, the most reactive Tamer in the security is definitely going to go to BT13 Marcus. Love or hate the guy, you have to admit the splash ability this Tamer brings, for not only setting your memory to 3, but every time he's suspended, it's minus 3000 DP at a Digimon. Floodgates are not safe. Honestly, Shine Greymon in my mind is one of the leading contenders in BT14, also for the fact that Marcus Damon is a built-in Floodgate remover, so they can continue to use training options all they want as long as they can wipe the board. But now, it's time to talk about some option cards. Some of these option cards even counter previous mentioned cards, and while you may think some of these cards are obvious picks, finding space for the deck is another question altogether. Because the upcoming format has quite a few wide board building decks, these are the option cards that I felt would make a dent in them. Number 1, Crimson Blaze. This option card is not only a great counter to decks like Bloom Lordmon, Fenrir Lugomon, Digipolice, and Justmon, but for the fact that it deletes Digimon with jamming due to their relatively low stat line. This wipes away most boards of other Digimon instantly, especially being a great counter to D-Brigade and Bloom Lordmon. Some of these decks have a hard time coming back afterwards, as most of the time their hand has just been played out, and they haven't drawn any additional cards. Alternatively, if you think the DP is absolutely necessary, Atomic Megaloblaster is another consideration I've been looking at. Mainly because this card is more flexible in that you can delete multiple Digimon or just a single target with 10,000 DP or less. You know what has 10,000 DP or less? Level 5 Ace Digimon. When it comes to blue option cards, there are a lot of cards that can strip sources. The first and most popular one is Sorai. This allows you to trash the top 4 Digivolution cards of one of your opponent's Digimon, then until the end of your opponent's turn, your opponent's Digimon with no Digivolution cards can't attack. Only downside to this card is that they can get around it by simply Digivolving on top of a Digimon without sources, or even worse, a hybrid for game. Which takes me to option number 4. Innocence Blizzard. Unlike Sorai, which targets one Digimon and strips 4 sources, Innocence Blizzard is a blanket one source on all of your opponent's Digimon. Then its secondary effect prevents up to 3 Digimon with no Digivolution cards from attacking or blocking until the end of your opponent's next turn. Due to the wording, this Digimon is stunned, regardless if it Digivolves next turn. In terms of overall removal, in a format where level 5s may be more prevalent, Rattlestar is a neat option card. In the face of Ace Digimon in particular, it goes from a 5-cost option to a simple 2-cost option card after the memory refund. Likewise, Ice Statue is very plausible when playing against decks that build a stack with only 3 Digivolution cards, i.e. the level 2, 3, and 4, and then Ace Digivolving again makes it highly vulnerable. One thing I don't like about Ice Statue against Ace Digimon is it gives your opponent another chance to use it. Yellow doesn't frequently get too much double removal. As a result, Lunky Adastocto is the only card that really comes up for me on my radar. But in terms of blanket effects, Holy Flame is pretty good in the case if it hits security. Green is a little tricky, mainly because there aren't a lot of green option cards that do more than one removal. Grandel's Soul is honestly the only one that I looked over that did a lot of damage. You get to suspend one, and then bounce one that's suspended to the bottom of the deck. Ground Fang also caught my eye, but it does require your opponent's Digimon and Tamer to be suspended. But when it comes to black option cards, there are quite a few goodies out there. Breath of the Gods can be helpful in that your Digimon can't be DP reduced, or returned to the owner's hand or deck. The downside is, most of the ridiculous removal is source stripping and outright deletion. This won't save you, but if it's in security, it does buy you a turn. A Blazing Storm of Metal is another interesting option card, but really is only useful for decks that have Reboot, meaning this card would likely live in a jank deck. Personally, Congo is my favorite of the option cards due to its flexibility to be a damper against Ace Digimon, whether they're level 5 or 6, and of course, Hybrid Digimon. Digi-Dimension goes back to what I discussed previously with the Digipolice deck, in that you can de-Digivolve 3 targets by 1, and then delete a number of Digimon with a play cost of 6 or less. Guess what? This card isn't deleting 3 Digimon with a total play cost of 6 or less. It's each. Even Metal Garurumon Ace is 6 cost, and all other level 5 Ace Digimon are less than that. This screams value to me on so many levels. And finally, when it comes to purple cards, purple is one of few decks that usually has built-in destruction into the deck. Most of their options are better suited in the trash and trigger a secondary effect. But generally speaking, these are all cards that I've been heavily looking into. Because again, with the restriction of new cards and the unrestriction of others, the upcoming BT14 format is a whole new format to explore. What are your thoughts on the options I picked, and which do you see yourself teching in? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you next week. This is DigiPanda, logging out.